All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I have the pleasure of speaking with someone who has been a former colleague in the past, but remains a friend all the way through to today, Chrissy Li. She is the founder and CEO of her own consulting firm, C. Li Consulting. But even just beyond that, her background in Robert Half and in the financial services background. It's just amazing to be able to speak with someone with such a diverse background. And I don't mean that tongue in cheek because of Beyond Labels DEIB Explored being this webcast. But in all seriousness, as we look at Asian Pacific Heritage Month and we think about diversity and just getting past labels, getting past outward appearances, and learning more about what DEIB presents itself in real life scenarios and in real conversations. Thought this conversation with Chrissy can not only educate people, but it's just real conversation. So just as we always do, real casual conversation, unfiltered, just people really being able to talk about their personal experiences. And so with that, and with her babysat pup in the background, love to turn it over to you, Chrissy. And just if you could, for the audience, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me on. Clearly, I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't done this recently. I'm excited to talk to you. I remember when we first met, this is pre-pandemic. We had a lot
Uh-huh.
of great conversations in person. And then after the lockdown, we had a lot of great conversations over the phone. And it's just been
Exactly.
stay in touch with you this whole time. And yes, I definitely view you as a good friend. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me, I think. Thanks for the introduction. I'm currently in DC, kind of crazy about plants. So this
Hmm.
is my little botanic gardens in my own home. Let's see, where do I begin? I guess professionally, yes, like
Hmm.
I said, I started my career in public accounting. Went to school at the University of Maryland, studied accounting and finance, and like a lot of people, went directly into financial statement audits, which
Hmm.
not much fun for me. I
Oh, it
did,
sounds awesome.
I did about 3 years. I think the biggest takeaway from my public accounting experience is was just working with people my own age and learning to navigate different personalities and obviously trying to do a good job. But I did 3 years of financial statement audits. Most of my clients were government agencies, and those are pretty long audits. And
Hmm.
I had always wanted to apply my Mandarin Chinese language skills to my profession. So I looked around within the firm and I found the advisory practice and switched over to forensic accounting. So I did some corporate fraud investigations, some mergers and acquisition due diligence, and proactive compliance assessments. And a lot of that work took me to China, which was so cool when I was in my, I would say, late 20s, getting
Hmm.
paid to travel. And while I'm there, uh, eating great food, meeting fun people, and visiting my family. I'm originally from China.
Hmm.
But the work really took a toll. It was just so unpredictable. I would travel, I would be on a client meeting at 11 a.m. By 11:30, it's decided I need to go home, pack up, and go straight to the airport and fly to China.
Whew.
So yeah, most of my work was in China. I did spend a lot of time in Europe as well, and the routes, flying between Dulles International Airport here to some major cities around the world, they just became way too familiar. I never
Hmm.
knew what time zone I was in. I was on first name basis with flight attendants on certain flights.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Hmm.
it really took a toll, and it also just really wasn't my calling. I think the work that I was doing was very, very important, and I have such respect for my colleagues who are still with the firm now at director partner levels. They're
Hmm.
doing some amazing work, and as a matter of fact, throughout the year, I do some consulting for them as well. Um,
Okay.
it's a lot of great work, but it just wasn't my calling. So took some time off to figure out what the heck to do with myself. I was
Hmm.
still young at the time. Um, and when I was ready to go back to a full-time job, I approached my previous employer, a staffing firm, and said, "Here's my resume. Please find me a job." and I went in for a typical candidate interview. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, a manager walked in and said, well, you have a great resume. We can help you look for a job, but have you ever considered recruiting work?
Mm-hmm.
I had been in touch with a couple of recruiters in my career. Didn't really feel very connected to any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they were great, but I think the work I was doing was just so niche that it was difficult for them to find something. And quite honestly, I did not want to go back to what I was doing before I took the break. So they asked if I would consider recruiting. I talked to as many people as I possibly could to get information about recruiting and thought, why not? Let's give it a shot. So that was in 2013. And I've now been doing this for 11 years, if I'm doing my math correctly. Um,
Nice.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I feel like I just stop me whenever you need. I feel like I'm
Ah,
doing.
no, this is great because I think that one thing we do in these unfiltered conversations is hopefully, even if it's one person out there that connects, right, and says, "Wow, what Chrissy is saying really resonates with me." That's really what we go for, and just making sure that we're reaching out to people and giving a voice, maybe to those who don't necessarily feel they have one, and our conversations have always been so fluid. And so I always want conversations to feel through a webcast just like they do in real life. So, no, this is great. And, one thing that's interesting, because you mentioned that you're from China, um, what our viewers may or may not know about me, depending on if they're new or not, is that I'm half Korean, half Black. And, with Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and I'd love to get your thoughts here, Chrissy. The I think the Asian demographic, and this is just my personal experience being in-house leading talent acquisition, in corporate, in-house doing DEI, and then being in search, just like you, for a good deal of my career. I typically find it interesting when people refer to Asians or Asia, whether it's a demographic in a company or when you're reaching out to people, that they kinda think of a stereotypical Asian person. They don't think of, well, there's Southwest Asia, there's Southeast Asia, there's China, there's Korea, there's Japan. Like, what are you talking about? Because Asia is massive. Like, in your experience doing, let's start with search first. How often do you kind of feel like you're running into this label, this stereotype that when someone's referring to Asia, maybe they have one thought in mind of the type of person, but you're like, being Asian of Asian heritage, you're just like, let's clarify. Does that kind of happen to you a lot?
Um, Actually, not until recently.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact that I just learned. Asian American Heritage Month was established officially in May of 1990 by
Mm-hmm.
former President George Bush. And 1990 was also the year that I immigrated to the US.
Oh,
And
wow.
no idea that there was
Mm-hmm.
such thing as Asian American Heritage Month until recent years. And it's interesting because, of course, growing up in China, I just woke up every day as me as a person. I never woke up thinking, I'm Asian today. uh,
Yeah, that's a great
and
point.
And I feel like after moving here and, prior to learning about the history of this country, I just sort of, I mean, I was 11 years old at that time. I just figured, well, this is someone else's country that I'm coming into. But over the years, learning the history of how this country was made up, I began to feel like, no, I belong here too. It's not someone.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, it took me a long time to feel that belonging. Um, but I do feel like Asian, any group of people, we do get lumped into one group, and it's just assumed that we're all the same, which is rather frustrating. And I think it became even I more noticeable now. I'm recently married, and my
Mm-hmm.
is from Chile, from South America,
Okay.
and he moved here about 10 months ago. And same, he woke up every day, Diego. He was
Mm-hmm.
a person, he never woke up thinking, I'm Latino.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in the US and he's been lumped into this group. Meanwhile,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many differences between Chile, even oh, that's a pup.
Oh, no worries. You'll probably hear my kids or my dog at any moment.
Yeah.
So this is life. It's perfectly fine.
Oh, great. No, Diego just came home and she's excited to see him, but the door was closed.
Oh,
Um,
no worries.
anyway, we're all set now. Yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, you're talking about Diego just kind of now all of a sudden being in America, being lumped in with a group of
Right,
people, right?
right. Yeah, everyone just assumes that he loves tacos. I think he's
hmm
only had Mexican food maybe once or twice in his life. And even a couple of days ago, he was asking me, he's like, what's a taco really? Is it the soft shell? Is it taco? Yeah, so it's just
hmm
that they're all the same. So going
hmm
back to the group that you and I get lumped into,
hmm
assume that we're all the same. Sure, we may have, similar spices in our foods and
hmm
different language, different cultures, different history. Um, and yeah, it's a little bit more frustrating now that I'm more aware of it.
hmm
Um, but yeah, now I think, especially in recent few years, more and more people are more vocal about talking about their backgrounds, and I find that I think it's a good thing that we're able to.
hmm
For me, for the longest time,
hmm
I felt like, well, let me just stay quiet and, live my life, and because I'm in someone else's country, and
hmm
well, we all belong here. Every group of people um, has worked very hard to, earn their belonging here. So we all belong here.
That really makes sense. And, and this is just an honest question because I'd love your opinion on it. To what extent do you think Asian American Heritage Month is just another made up month, just another awareness month, versus to what extent do you think there's some real authenticity there? Because you've been in house, you have been and now are a consultant, so you have different perspectives, right? You've been on both sides of the table. So what are your thoughts on that? I have mine and I'm more than willing to share mine after you or before you, whatever your thought is, but I'd love to hear your thoughts and just what comes to mind when you think of this month?
Um, that is a very authentic question.
Mm-hmm.
I, let's see. In my experience, I genuinely cannot remember a company I worked for,
Mm-hmm.
and two very large ones and a couple smaller ones. I genuinely cannot remember a time where it was actually observed.
Mm-hmm.
I can't.
Yeah.
And I think if it is observed, it's marketing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you post something on LinkedIn to say happy whatever awareness month it is, but internally, are we really doing anything about it? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really thought about it until you asked me this question.
That's great. That's exactly what we want to be able to do because just the pure in the moment feelings about something like this. And, maybe I'll give you my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts and we just continue the dialogue. But it's interesting because I know you personally embrace and you have a passion for DEI, as do I, right? And that's why I've always worked in this mindset of I want to eventually try to be in DEI in a company, and I got to do it at Activision Blizzard. And you kind of think about, wow, you're in a tech environment. So there's gonna probably be more accessibility, more vulnerability, more people who understand the Asian culture and how big it is. Um, and I've got to say, to a certain extent, with the employee resource group or the ERG, as you typically hear, we all banded together. We all shared thoughts on food, culture, travel, etc. And that was great. Once you get out of that ERG or that employee resource group, it still felt like, and even the technology verified this, that it was just Asians. So when you kind of think about the demographics of your organization, it would say Black African American, it would be gender diversity, and they just say Asian, and it was just like, hmm. I'm sure they fixed it since then, and I've been at Choice Hotels International, et cetera, but it is a very large group of people. And to what extent do you maybe make one demographic within Asia less significant or more just by the number of people you have? And to what extent does it shine a light on how diverse you really are? Are people mainly coming from China, India, Korea, Japan, Philippines, right? Think about Southwest Asia in general, right? And it's just one of those things where you want it to mean more than Asian American Heritage Month and the hallmark moment that it is. And you want to make it more about the people and a true understanding that we have these people in our organization, so many different cultures, and we just want to make them feel like they belong here and they're not lumped into this big group. I feel like companies are moving that way. Just like you were saying, you don't remember like truly like celebrating it or just saying like this is a thing and we want to acknowledge that you exist, Chrissy, not only as an employee but as an individual and you are someone who belongs here. Um, but I can only continue to hope that it does change and it does continue to get bigger and better and metrics can address it. And I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on how you would or how you have educated even clients in the
Mhm.
past. Let's say someone says, "You know what, Chrissy, I want diversity. You know what? We don't have any Asian people in our organization." And this is a hypothetical. If someone were to say, "Chrissy, I'd love you for you to find some Asian people for our organization," because you and I have heard it all, seen it all. How would you consult with a client that says that to you? Just like, what would your thought process be as an Asian American yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that has happened. I want to say probably at least 3 or 4 times in my recruitment career.
Hmm.
And whether it's asking for a diverse candidate or a man or a woman.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, the initial reaction is always a little bit awkward because to this day, I I look for candidates. I hire people not based on their gender or their religion or their ethnicity. But I do appreciate that we need to create more opportunities for people of all backgrounds. And essentially I tell clients, let's say if they're looking for a woman or
Hmm.
and only, the first thing I say is I cannot hire based on someone's gender. I can,
Hmm.
based on someone's ethnic background. I start off with their professional experience and how they're going to match what you're looking for. So
Amen. Hmm.
I do tell them that. But at the same time, perhaps it's because I'm um, in a city where there's a lot of diversity. I mean, there's people from all over the world. Whether their family immigrated here when they were young, or maybe they're new immigrants themselves. I actually find quite a large percentage of the job seekers I work with are diverse candidates. I want to say at this point, probably 85 to 90%. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, I think again, I'm candid with my clients. I tell them I understand, someone would tell me, it's I think we'll do a little bit better with a woman in this role because of such and such and such. And
Hmm.
I'm very candid with them,
Hmm.
candid with them. Um, and ultimately will, try my best to meet all of their needs, but still don't hire based on, like I said, gender, ethnic background.
Hmm.
Still focus on experience first, but take a lot of pride when I can find someone who meets all of the technical requirements and also happens to be someone that that really fits the culture.
Yeah, and I love that philosophy too because um one of the thoughts I've had even working with clients if I'm doing executive search in-house, so my clients are also colleagues versus being a consultant, is asking them why. Like, okay, you think you say you want a woman in the role and because of maybe these situations are happening and there's a sensitive environment, but why? Like besides that maybe instance that you want to address. Why? Um, Asian American, Asians, are you building out in Asia a business? And this like that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and hey, I need someone who, is from Africa, and we are building business in Africa and we don't have a presence there. Well, okay, because that's tied to work, that's tied to business and, objectives and growth, etc. But for the most part, it does seem like organizations, when they do ask that, I love to kind of try to dig deeper and see, like, have you created an environment where those people can succeed? If you say you acknowledge that we don't have enough women in the leadership roles in our organization, and therefore I've been like you to find some women, that's awesome. That like we're stepping in the direction of being progressive and just being a human being and just acknowledging like where we lack and where we need to grow. But have you created an environment where there aren't enough women? You're saying this as a client and all of a sudden you want to bring someone in, is it a culture or environment where they can thrive, where they can feel like they belong? What are your thoughts on that? Like if a client were to say something like that, and if they just don't have an environment where someone can succeed, or in this case, Asian American Heritage Month, if they'd want Asian Americans or just Asians in their organization, not having the infrastructure to support that, what would you kind of do with that situation?
Well, I've actually been in that situation myself.
Hmm.
And at the time, I just didn't really have the tools or the resources or even really the thought to ask a question like that. But having been through it myself, I certainly now, if a client came to me and said, I want to find a woman to fill this role or Asian woman to fill this role, I probably would ask more directly why. And like you said, can you support it? I was hired into a role, into a management role, and every other management level person was a man. Uh,
Hmm.
and I was told that we need a woman in this position. And ultimately, I just felt like I was hired to check off a couple of
Mhm.
boxes.
Mhm.
I think for you as well, when you
Mhm. Oh,
hired.
yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and genuinely, for the next 2+ years, I had no voice.
Mhm.
I was in management. I had no voice. I thought I could walk in and they told me they wanted my ideas. They wanted to, make some improvements to processes, but I feel like they heard me talk and they
Mhm.
heard my ideas, but they didn't actually really listen.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I actually tried quite hard to have some more extensive conversations about, hey, I don't feel like I'm being heard. You asked me to come in to do ABC. I'm trying, but I don't really see, anything
Mhm.
I'm recommending implemented. So unfortunately I had to experience that myself, but also fortunately, because I have that personal experience, if this were to happen, I will be asking more direct questions because
Mhm.
I, really take care of the candidates I work with, the job seekers.
Exactly.
We all know looking for a job is such a stressful experience, and you spend more time at your workplace than you do with your own family and friends. So I want to make sure that wherever I place a candidate, it's a good spot for them. It's a
Mhm.
um, so I feel like because of my experience with because of my very, I would say, very negative or even borderline traumatic
Yeah,
experiences,
yeah.
I
Mhm.
would better take care of future candidates for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's great.
I think it sounds cool to say, oh, we want to, hire, we want to have more diversity in our company, but you've got to, make an effort and lay out a path to make that person feel like they belong. I think one of the things that can be done is just through conversations and storytelling. You know,
Mhm.
I always felt it's nice if I can share more about my background because even though I've lived most of my life in the US, um, I had a very, very different life growing up in China in the 80s. I feel like
Mhm.
two lives. So I definitely have some experience and stories to share that are very almost difficult to hear for some people who grew up here.
Mhm.
I think it's important to hear some of those things because our past sort of, defines who we are and
Mhm.
the way we make certain choices, the way we behave, the way we speak, the way we think. So I think it's important to talk about, people's respective backgrounds.
Mhm.
And if companies were really wanting to embrace uh, any kind of awareness month, they really should have some activities internally for people to really get to know each other and get to know each other's backgrounds, as opposed to just
Mhm.
something on LinkedIn to say, we're here for, Asian Heritage Month.
Exactly. And I swear, I wish I could remember the source because being an intelligence officer in my past, I love citing sources. So, to the audience and people who are listening, it is out there. I read the article, but I will try to figure out where it was posted. But I thought it was fascinating. It was saying in global organizations, Chrissy, that the part of the world that typically feels the most left out with regard to time consideration and consideration of their work-life balance is Asia and Australia, right? And especially with American headquartered organizations that are global, it's usually the Asian demographic and Australians that are typically the ones that have to accommodate the time switch.
Mhm.
And I thought that was fascinating because, obviously, if you look at the time zones, South America, North America aligned, I've had to work with them and it was great. If you're working with Europe, it's maybe 6 or 7 hours or so, which anyone can kind of accommodate. But yeah, again, it's the Europeans that are accommodating to us, right? I just spoke with a candidate who's in Spain and it was 6 o'clock his time, 6 p.m. or 1800, 24-hour clock for anyone who's around the world. But yeah, he's like, no, don't worry, Ivan, in Spain, we have dinner around 9 o'clock. So this is actually very early and it's not dinner, it's not interfering with anything. But, kind of going back to that and just accommodating times, it's that little piece, I think, when you say you're going to create an environment where everyone feels accepted, that you even think about time considerations and accommodations to someone's lifestyle. Kind of, what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever had to do any of that travel, like you were talking about earlier in this conversation? And you're like, man, I'm really having to accommodate all sorts of other timelines all the time. And I'm the one making the accommodation, or my clients in China are making the accommodations all the time. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, your questions are definitely uh, bringing back some memories.
Mm-hmm.
I can, well, at the moment when I'm working in my consulting role, we typically work with teams in China.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on daylight savings, no daylight savings, we could be anywhere from 12 to 13 hours apart. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times the Chinese team, they're accommodating to our time. So if we
Mm-hmm.
want to meet at 9 a.m., it's sometimes 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. there.
Mm-hmm.
They have lives, they have families.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's quite difficult. So I try to you know, with the team here, I mean, they set the schedule here, but sometimes we'll say, well, how about we meet at 7:30 or 8 a.m. So it's not so late for them. We can get
Mm-hmm.
earlier. And for myself, when I did do the forensic accounting work full time, I remember having to leave DC on
Mm-hmm.
Saturday and fly across the world and arrive China, whichever city I'm in, by Sunday evening.
Mm-hmm.
Take some kind of sleep aid so I can get to sleep and wake up first thing in the morning on Monday to go straight to the client site and start work.
Mm-hmm.
All day feeling extremely exhausted. And after the work day, we would go have a dinner meeting with the client
Mm-hmm.
at the hotel by about 8:30. That's when my US team woke up and had a status call with them.
Mm-hmm.
And So that would last about 30 minutes. And then I would spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours writing up an outline for the progress of the day.
Mm.
So by that time, it's easily 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m. And then trying to get to sleep when when your clock is completely backwards.
Oh yeah.
It's challenging. I mean, you can appreciate after several years of that why I needed to leave that lifestyle. It was just too.
Mm-hmm.
I gave up so much.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like with certain types of work, it's just so incredibly demanding and it's not fair. I do feel like um lost quite a lot of time with my friends and family during
Mm-hmm.
years, and definitely had an impact on my personal life and even physical health. I
Mm-hmm.
poorly, didn't have time to exercise, there was no routine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. I think we do give up a lot.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I think one thing that's interesting, you and I spoke about this the other day, that this month is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and we know we could go to town on that topic, and we'll try to keep this one centered around Asian American Heritage Month for our viewers. But what I would ask, because I think growing up with a Korean mother, um, that I think mental health, and even as we reflect on how some of us were raised now in our 40s and our 50s, myself in the 40s, we reflect back and we think about our kids. So my wife is also, for the viewers and the listeners, Korean American as well, raised by a Korean mom. Um, wow, we were just raised differently. And it's for those reasons and almost the mental trauma of just perfection, perfection, perfection. If it's an A minus, it's a B. And if it's a B, it might as well be a C. Why did you even take this class? And so it's just like, not wanting to put that pressure on your kids, but also thinking, it's kind of successful. Maybe there was some secret sauce in there, but my goodness, it was a part of the culture that I was raised in, and I think that being perfect and presenting perfectly all the time was just very much a you don't bring dishonor amongst the family. We are a very proud family. And so I think that in and of itself could be like a mental health slash Asian American Heritage Month thing. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts, because I know you did even say earlier, and I wish we had time because I don't want to take up your entire day, but to what extent do you feel like your Asian heritage and Asian American heritage, and now as an experienced professional and even continue on and educating clients, uh, how do you address that mix of balancing culture, the way you were raised, and even future generations? For instance, if you had a younger Asian American joining your team, your consulting team, or you were in-house and they were joining the organization, how would you develop them as a leader based on what you know about the culture and how you were raised in the culture?
Mhm. Um, let's see. I will only speak to my Chinese culture that I know
Mm-hmm.
of. Going back
Mm-hmm.
to saying before, I don't want to generalize and assume that all Asian people,
Exactly.
Asian cultures are the same. So in my Chinese culture, we go back thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
very generational trauma too. Uh, but like you said, there's a lot of perfectionism involved. You just had to be the best at everything.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, China, I think some years ago, India took over as the largest population in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Longest
Ooh,
time.
wow.
I might have to go search after this call, but for the
Mm-hmm.
longest, China was the most populous country in the world, and gosh, growing up there wasn't easy. Even as a fourth grader, what are you like, eight or nine at fourth grade? I remember having to stay up till 1 a.m. doing homework. There was no
Oh,
time.
I actually should know that answer. My daughter's 8 and she's in second grade. Okay.
Oh, so fourth grade, then you would be nine? Nine.
Mm-hmm. 9, 10. Yep.
Yeah, I remember having to the way our schedule was, we would be at school by 7:30, and we would have 4 hours of pretty intense lessons. And most of what we did was Chinese literature and mathematics.
Mhm.
have a break in the middle of the day for all of us to go home, disperse and go home, have lunch. And then we were all required to take a nap because we have to return to school at 2:30. Uh,
Whoa.
we're in school in classes again from 2:30 to about 6:30 or 7. Then we go home for dinner and then start our homework.
Mhm.
I think by fifth grade, every single night I had to write a composition for Chinese literature. I mean, we're talking
Mhm.
like multiple pages of Chinese writing,
Mhm.
which is a lot.
Mhm.
It was just really tough. That's just how we were raised, and we didn't know any different, really. I
Mhm.
was exhausted as a fourth grader,
Mhm.
but I was always told that wasn't good enough, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So, you know, got a better grade in math than I did, you know,
Mhm.
so writes poetry better than I do. Um, I would say I was probably better with Chinese literature than mathematics, because I feel like a lot of times whenever I wrote an essay, it would just get put on the wall in the classroom. Look
Yeah.
at what you did, follow
Mhm.
it. But it was really challenging. So when by fifth grade in math, we were doing algebra
Mhm.
and also like very, very difficult word problems. So when I moved to the US, joined sixth grade,
Mhm.
first math question in the math book was 1 plus 1. My dad freaked out. He's like, I can't,
Mhm.
this is the level that they're teaching at sixth grade. As I'm saying this, I would appreciate, no, I appreciate that some people might be hearing this and thinking, oh, you're just sort of, speaking poorly of the US education system. I don't want to generate any controversy or anything like that. But
No
it is
worries.
true, but it is
Mhm.
true. I feel like our standards here in the US just aren't aren't high enough.
Mhm.
So so imagine having that mentality where you should always be better, could always do better. I also feel like in my career, when I worked with younger staff, I treated them probably the same way that my parents treated me as far
Mhm.
as standards. I don't think I had the tools and the wherewithal to really think about all this stuff until I was much older.
Mhm.
I don't know you, but I feel like I finally grew up right about 36 or 37,
Mhm.
where I started to become more self-aware and really think things through, have a filter before I talked. Um,
Mhm.
but I know that in my career, I definitely could have, perhaps treated younger staff um, better.
Mhm.
Educated them better, but I was growing up myself. What was I supposed to do? I didn't really have the right training. But
Mhm.
I think I am rambling a little bit, but I think the perfectionism in my Chinese culture definitely made it difficult for me because I mean my husband will point it out to me now that I'm constantly trying to solve a problem, trying to
Yeah.
fix something, whatever it is I did, I'm not happy with it. I feel like
Mhm.
I can redo it. And my brother is 16 years my junior, and I pretty much raised him as my own kid. I did this
Mhm.
my parents did to me.
Mhm.
Regrets I have, but he and I are
Mhm.
he, now that we've had some very open conversations about our relationship and our dynamic, and I apologize for my tiger momness.
Oh, wow. Mhm.
He just said, I just believe that whatever you did it with the best intention. So thank goodness he said that because I carry a lot of guilt. But yeah, I think it's in us.
Mhm.
We end up subconsciously passing it on to other people.
Mhm.
Um, unless you're really, really aware, really take a step back and be conscious of what you're doing. It's really hard to change.
Mhm.
I definitely feel like it's had a impact on my own mental health.
Mhm.
It's helpful to have that awareness finally, better late than never, and then
Mhm.
taking actions to correct or adjust, our behaviors or the way we speak to other people, the way we think, and challenge some of the ideals that we've had because of the way we were raised.
That's an interesting piece that you brought up too. Like, what would you say? Because you're talking about your mid-30s, you felt like you quote unquote like grew up, right? What did you do for like anybody who's listening to the webcast? Were they books? Were they online training sessions? Was it just Literally contemplation, self-reflection, etc. Like, what were some of the things that you did, or what are some of the things you would recommend to people?
Uh, Thinking back, I think thinking a little farther back in my mid-20s, I remember
Mm-hmm.
knowing what I know now, I had a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That time, I don't think I even knew the word anxiety. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have terminology. We didn't have the resources to even label what it is we're feeling, our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in my mid-20s. I had anxiety, it definitely impacted my work. And in my 10 years later, about 36, 37, I think that's when I discovered mental health podcasts. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really, help promote any one in particular right now, but just the fact that people are talking about emotions and
Yeah.
your upbringing can impact your current day.
Mm-hmm.
It was just very mind blowing, and I think having access to that was really helpful. Um, Not everyone can afford therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I do hope that people can find ways, to talk to people, whether it's to a professional or to a very trusted friend or colleague.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that the podcast, the mental health podcasts, were really, really helpful to me. I remember the day that I heard about generational trauma. I nearly fell over. I was like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
why I am the way I am today. I thought
Yep.
about all these things that my mother does or says, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I get it. So now I'm pretty conscious of all those things. So yeah, I think that there's just an incredible number of podcasts out there that are free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that are obviously look at your source,
Mm-hmm.
not you can go online and talk about their feelings and emotions, but
Absolutely.
trusted sources, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book by Angela Duckworth, I absolutely love it. Grit.
Yes.
Uh, yes, love that book. And I don't care, I'll say it on my webcast. Because it's an amazing book. I wish you would have analyzed the Air Force Academy instead of West Point cadets, but that's beyond that. But I love what she said. It's something I related to. It's something where she's providing real thoughts, inside raw emotions that she felt at the time. And she continues to try to educate others. And to your point, with podcasts, webcasts, the ability to go for a walk and turn something on your phone and just have headphones on. Oh my goodness, that is great. Um, so I would say that you know, when you think about your mission, even in Sealy Consulting, right? You have this DEI lens and experience and background. You kind of think about what work you do on executive placement, whether it's an executive search, right, with different clients. Um, how would you kind of like your audience, given our conversation, right? How would you like, whether it's viewers who are Asian American or people who are allies, how would you like them to view Asian American Heritage Month if you had your way? Like, you're like, you know what, kind of coming out of this conversation, all the things we kind of discussed, I wish American or Asian American Heritage Month was viewed this way or acted upon this way. What kind of your thoughts be?
uh well, first, it would be helpful if people actually even acknowledged it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
So
that
true.
after, because there's so many awareness things, like I don't want to minimize this, but like even like National Grilled Cheese Day, there's just so many days or months for all sorts of things that people are desensitized to it.
Mm-hmm.
I do wish more people would acknowledge Asian American Heritage Month. I do wish people would, if they have any Asian friends, I don't know, have a gathering,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, and express some interest in their background. I have great friends who just say, "Oh, I don't see color. You're just," me." And in the past, it was like, "Oh, that's great. We're the same." But most recently, a friend of mine said that, and I actually said to him, Of course, in a joking manner, I didn't want to make him feel bad. I just
Hmm.
said, actually, you should see color because we're different.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's a
so
great point.
so wish people would, forget the corporate stuff.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
all the changes kind of come from the individual level, right? Talk to some friends who might be, Asian,
Hmm.
or a podcast to listen to, or read some news articles, or read a book.
Hmm.
Start within, and really show an interest, as opposed to just, oh, my company said Happy Asian American Heritage Month.
Hmm.
I would really love it if people would make some more changes from the individual level.
Hmm. That's
And from one
I
group.
love that. I love that. And it's interesting. Food has always been a part of Korean culture. Um, you gather around food. We were just in Korea with my whole family. My mother-in-law, who is Korean, and her husband, we all went out there and met generations of her family in Korea. And it was just so awesome how they didn't see me as someone with, "Hey, wait a minute. You don't you look a little bit different," It was just, "Your family. Let's all eat food." I cannot speak fluent Korean, and I kick myself to this day. But it's just one of those things where if you know the culture, because 'cause I've lived in it, I grew up in it. My mom was learning to speak English as I was learning to talk as a kid, and she had no Korean friends, in England where I was born. And so just trying to find community, she was trying to fit in. She was speaking nothing but English. And to speak Korean to me, it was just like, I'm a little kid. I had nothing. I was like, no, I'm not ready to do this. I'm just gonna keep on doing what I want to do. Um, yeah, I just wish, whether it's food, culture, music, in corporate environments, but even if it's the real stuff, like, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and make sure that meetings are always twice a day, the same content. We're gonna make sure that we adjust for our colleagues who are in Asia or in different time zones, that we do not change the time of the meeting. We keep to an agenda, not because we're boring, but because it gives respect to the people who are adjusting their lives to meet the meeting. Um, yeah, I think some of those real, like those tangible things can be helpful. And exactly like you said, the corporate stuff, like we're not going to bring in, Korean food or Chinese food into an organization and feel like, yeah, we celebrated Asian American Heritage Month. Because in a Korean household, it's not called Korean food, it's just food. And
Hey,
so
just food, Chinese
yeah,
food.
exactly. And so, no, I really appreciated this context and this conversation. And what I would encourage the viewers and listeners, if you're open to it, is that I think you're the type of person that if anybody had any questions or they just wanted to connect with you after this, or they felt like what you said resonated with them, would you be open to like just them reaching out to you via like LinkedIn, or is that what something that'd be more open to, that you'd be open to?
Yes, I can be found on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I can as well, as usual, if people have any questions. But I want to make sure that when we think about the whole premise of this webcast, beyond labels, Asian American Heritage Month. Let's get past the labels. Let's get past what we think are Asian people, and dig a little bit more deeply. Um, DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and even I've heard DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. There's so many acronyms, aren't there? It's just one of those things where we just need to make the effort. If we are already diverse, then are people feeling like they're included, they belong? Do we have accessibility for everyone to either apply to our roles or feel like they're accepted in the organization and they can access everything the same way as everyone else? Um, there's a lot of ways that we can look at DEI without thinking that it's this negative term or negative word that's out there. So I want to say heartfelt thanks to my friend, Chrissy. And, I can't say thanks enough for everything that you've been able to share with us because just like we always say, like, these are just raw conversations. You and I just came into this and we're just like, let's wing it because let's talk from the heart of what this means to us. So thank you so much. And
Probably times you could tell I didn't prepare anything. But I want to thank you too. I feel like every time I speak with you, I feel like I've had a very healthy therapy session, and I kind of want here. And one thing I did want to say before we wrap up,
Please.
I feel like most of our conversation has been sort of directed to the non-Asian group.
Mhm.
Um, I want to say to all those in the Asian group, just embrace your heritage.
Ooh, I love that.
I think back when I was 11 years old and I moved to the US, there were not a whole lot of foreigners here. I was
Mhm.
embarrassed to look different, to sound different. I didn't speak the language at all. Sort of like walked around feeling clueless and scared and confused. And I was really embarrassed to be different.
Mhm.
And every time we went to the grocery store or anywhere in public, and my parents are conversing in Chinese, oh, I would get so embarrassed. I just want to hide in a hole.
Mhm.
Don't talk. They're gonna hear us and they're gonna know we're different, as if we don't already.
Mhm.
I really hated being different until
Mhm.
I tried not to speak Chinese at all until a few years later. I don't know what hit me. I just thought, I speak another language. It's kind of cool.
Mhm.
So Chinese is a very difficult language to maintain.
Mhm.
I really did my best to keep up with it, and fortunately was able to even use it in a business setting. But
Mhm.
I somehow just learned to embrace who I am, embrace my heritage, embrace the fact that I speak another language, embrace the fact that I look and sound different, dress differently from other people. It I think that's really important. I feel like a lot of
Mhm.
people come in, they try to fit in. I mean, as you said, your mom was trying to learn English. I have a, Chinese American friend who's now almost 60, and his parents were trying so hard to fit in that they never taught him any Chinese, and he hates it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so just embrace your own heritage, and if your name is difficult to pronounce, make people pronounce it. Just teach,
Yes.
whereas in my case, I was tormented as a kid. So I
Mhm.
changed my name. How I came up with the name, I'll probably share with you another time. But
Yeah.
because of the story, I embrace it. But if I came to the States today, I probably wouldn't change my name. I would teach
Mhm.
others to say my name properly. It's my identity. So embrace your heritage. Embrace who you are, and try not to go out of your way to conform to other people, and be palatable to other people. So that's what I wanted to leave with my Asian American community.
I love that. And I will not try to wrap up anything after that because that is amazing. I might make that a separate soundbite starring you and just it's so real. So from the heart. Thank you so much, Chrissy. And so if anyone has any questions, by all means, please feel free to reach out. This will be posted on our YouTube channel. And then we can also share a link via our LinkedIn profiles. That way we can just try to spread the word and just give people a sense of, you know what, Chrissy, Ivan, we see you. We understand. And for those who want to be allies, have strength in your allyship. And so with that, thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you
Okay,
so much,
thank you,
Chrissy.
and kudos to you.
All right.